up, what up, what up? Welcome to another episode of New Orleans Basketball and New Orleans Network podcast. As always, I am joined by my fellow middle brother, Garrick Raphael. What's popping with you, bro? It's been a long time.
Yes, it has. Yes, it has. What up, bro? Everything's all good on this side. Enjoying the basketball that we have. Shout out to the W. First of all, let me get this out the way. I'm going to talk about the W. That's what I enjoy to do. You are very welcome to skip past the intro if it so suits you. You know, I appreciate you coming. But you know that we have other interests outside of the Pelicans basketball. So yeah, man, I'm enjoying it, man. The W's in full effect. And I think, you know, we got some, like, the talent is at an all-time high. So each game is just so incredible. But I shout out to Vegas to see Asia play Caitlin Clark, and Asia put up 29 and 15 for me, which, you know, that's a slight night for Asia. But getting into the NBA finals, man, like, I'm excited about this matchup because there's some real chess moves to be made from a lot of different places on the floor between the Mavs and the Celtics. And listen, like we're going to get into some of the things that the Mavs did and that what this Mavs run to me personally has shown in regards to the Pelicans, right? And we'll get into that when we talk about free agency. But I think there's a lot of things that the Pelicans can take from what the Mavs did this season, the entire season that they experienced up until now. I think that there are some lessons and some things that the Pelicans can take from how the Dallas Mavs move this season. So I'm excited to get into it, man. But, you know, Pel's offseason is here. The offseason for the other teams are about to start soon as the finals is over. So got some things to get into. Can't wait to get into them with your brother. How's everything on your side?
Now that it doesn't storm or rain or tornado every single day in a row, I'm blessed, man. I can't complain from that standpoint. You're right.
That Texas weather making you remember New Orleans a lot, man. You sound like a lot of Louisiana weather going on in Texas.
Less than ideal for sure. But I mean, you bring up a really good point in terms of the finals. Like, I'm interested to see just the two styles go up against one another. From a Pelican standpoint, you look at Boston and you're like, that's what you want to emulate. You got two star wing players and you want to slowly grow around those wing players. Multiple years ago, people questioned their two stars and if they could play together. Last year, they were like, oh, the coach is not the one to get them there. Well, sure enough, they're in the finals after going, 12-2 to get to this point. And then you look at the Mavs, who not too long ago, they didn't make the playoffs last year, and now they're in the NBA Finals. Oh, by the way, everybody wanted to fire Jason Kidd last season and maybe at the beginning of this season, and now he got an extension, and he's in the final and went to the Western Conference Finals 2 out of the last 3 years. So it's like, man, if your window is short before people are ready to get out of there. But again, you look at the two teams and you see, you know, what the Pelicans want to emulate in terms of their style, but then you also look at the Mavs and say they've got two transcendent stars and they were able to put pieces around them and things like that. And it makes you think about what's next for the Pelicans. And before we get into that, like you said, make sure you guys will follow us on X, on Twitter, on IG, on TikTok. That's NO Basketball, no E. Make sure you're liking the episode below and make sure you subscribe to the channel. Like I said, the offseason, like, I'm kind of excited for the offseason. Like, I'm ready to start looking at what are the changes going to be. I think the NBA is in one of the best spots it's been in a long time, and where the league is wide open, especially in the West. And I think, like, they're set up for a really strong run for the next 10 years. So let's talk about some of this Pelicans news. The first thing, the Pelicans deferred, surprise, surprise, the Lakers pick of 17 and a draft that's not great, with another year of LeBron, maybe Bronny James too, another year of LeBron getting older, another year of AD, another year of maybe JJ Redick is the coach for the Lakers. It's crazy, the ties between the Pelicans and Lakers, but they defer the draft pick. I think everybody saw this coming. This wasn't necessarily a draft you wanted to have a bunch of draft picks in. Anything you take from that? Do you think maybe they keep it, they could have packaged that, and maybe that's a trade? Or do you just think it's smarter to bet on Lakers being worse next year?
Yeah, I think with the way that the injury luck that the Lakers had this season, and the season that they had, right? Like they had a pretty decent season. Because when you think about the players around them and the things that the things that they went through, as far as like the coaching and all of that. I think it was a prudent idea to go ahead and defer that to next season. You bet on the Lakers not having that great injury luck between AD and LeBron. You bet on them not being able to make the trade that everybody keeps talking about. And to be honest, in my opinion, you bet on them hiring JJ Redick, because I don't think that that's going to be a good hire. But yeah, so I think it's business as usual. I think everybody kind of expected this to happen, and the Pelicans went ahead and deferred that pick. And we as New Orleans, as petty as New Orleans is, you get another year of praying on actually having a reason to pray on the Lakers' downfall next season. So another year of that should be fun. So yeah, I think it's business as usual. They did exactly what I expected them to do.
Right. So that's the biggest piece of news, you would say. Obviously, the Pelicans let go of Zion's long-term trainer. I don't know if that's like a huge impact, but did anything jump off the page for you there? To me, the way I take it is Zion's realizing this is where I'm at, and I need to have the top of the line everything when it comes to my personal trainer, when it comes to my dietitian, when it comes to my chef. I think he's finally starting to get it, and so he's leveling up his game, just like Bron spends millions of dollars on his body. You're like, was there anything that like jumped off to you and said, that's interesting?
No, not immediately. I mean, I would like to kind of. I mean, I guess you will never get the story from either party. But you kind of want to, how did that conversation go? Like what led to like her being the first person, to be on the chopping block as far as, as the coaches that at least publicly. Yeah. Well, I mean, like this season. Yeah. Like how, what was the story behind it? But, like you said, I think we're watching the Pelicans go through a whole bunch of changes. They've gone through a whole bunch of changes as of like last season, as far as like the medical staff, the front office, and things like that. And so I think this is just part of the growth for the team and for the Pelicans. I think, she was an excellent trainer. I always used to see her on the sidelines, and she was always, have Zion's ear and other players as well. And so for what I know, she was really good at her job. And so, I'd just be interested to hear how that decision came about and what that conversation was. But other than that, I think this is just, like you said, a leveling up of the organization, and we'll see where they go as far as, who they bring in and what's the story behind the next person that they bring in.
Right. So you mentioned a bunch of changes, and obviously, even though we haven't officially hit the offseason or the beginning of the next season for the NBA, there's been so many things swirling around the NBA, even though you can't even make a move yet if you wanted to. And so that brings up a really good point. What's next for the Pelicans? So on one hand, you say, man, you had the second most wins in franchise history, most wins on the road in the NBA, winning record both at home and on the road. Some really good stats, some in-game stats, most threes in the game. Like, you've broken some stats and you've kind of taken the next step. Willie Green has won and added to the win totals 3 years in a row. But on the other hand, you still have a grand total of 0 minutes with Zion Williamson in the playoffs. So you really still don't know what you have at all, because Brandon Ingram was coming off an injury and he wasn't in rhythm. And so, like, you're kind of in the same spot, which is a crazy thing to say in year 6 of this, where you really don't know what's the next big move. Now, walking away from the season, again, because of BI's terrible performance in the playoffs against Lou Dort, and because of the way the Pelicans fizzled out, everyone's going to say BI's the answer. BI's got to go. I didn't walk away from the season saying BI was the biggest issue with the team. That's just not where I was. But since we're on the topic, what do you think, or if you were in charge, what are some of the biggest changes you're looking for the Pelicans to address where it comes to this awesome? Whether it's roster, whether it's coaching staff, whether it's coaching philosophy, whether it's the building, front office, where's your head at?
Well, first and foremost, give a shout out to Trajan Langdon, who also left from the Pelicans. Listen, it's weird because you see these people get new jobs. You hear James Borrego being attached to other jobs as well. But it's a double-edged sword, because it's like, on one side, you get that the Pelicans have failed in a lot of different ways, right? Like they didn't reach the goals that they set out to attain. Very obvious. You can see it with your own two eyes. But at the same time, something has to be working in the building for other teams to see that Trajan Langdon is worthy of a general manager job in Detroit, and that James Borrego is obviously worthy of getting another job, or another head coaching job. And so for those two gentlemen to be, Trajan to obviously be gone already, and James Borrego to be rumored to this job and that job and other job, it shows that there were some good people in house. And so to see that we already know that there's going to be a change in a lot of things when the general manager goes, and then if the lead assistant coach goes, then there's obviously James Borrego was brought into New Orleans for change. There's going to be another change to be had. And so just wanted to highlight those two gentlemen, if they're on, Trajan obviously on his way out, and if James Borrego is on his way out, that, obviously the Pelicans brought in some good people for them to be poached to other places. Now, changes for the roster, changes for the Pelicans. I think first and foremost, I would like a resolution to the Brandon Ingram saga quickly. All right. I agree with you that I didn't come out of the season saying that Brandon Ingram was the issue. If you listen to this podcast, we kind of laid it out ahead that Brandon Ingram struggles he struggles after he comes back from injury, whether it's regular season, preseason, whatever the case is. He takes games, a couple of games, to get back into the rhythm that you saw before whatever injury it is. We've seen it time and time again. You know how people say that, like, location, like that's the most important thing. In times like this, and in situations like this, I think timing is the worst possible, is the most important thing what we're seeing here, because Brandon Ingram got injured and came back at the worst possible time. It was like a groundswell of all the worst possible things to happen, a series of unfortunate events, if you will, for Zion to get injured, and then for Brandon Ingram to have to come back. And if he didn't have to come back and be good, he had to come back and be like awesome. Like, you needed him to be incredible in order to get this team wherever they needed to go, wherever you thought that they needed to go. And he just didn't have the runway to get that done. But I also understand that there is a clunkiness between CJ, Brandon Ingram, and Zion. And if Brandon Ingram is the guy that the Pelicans have said, okay, listen, this just isn't working, and so we want to bring in a different player or a different set of players, then so be it, right? Like, I understand that is the business, and that's what they wanted, that that's how they want to move. And if that's the case, then go ahead and delve into this trade market, and get something done, right? Like, don't rest on your laurels like you've seen this Pelicans front office do. If Trae Young is the guy that you circle, like, make an aggressive pitch for it. Like, go get him. Like, it's obviously, if he's available, then go get him. Other ways around, right? I just want to see a quick resolution to this, because I think going into yet another season of when you need to see Zion make another step, just having all of this kind of like just messiness around going in, that's not the makings and the markings of a championship ready team. When you have that, so make the decision early, rip the Band-Aid off, and make the trade if you're going to make the trade, or extend him if you're going to extend him. Don't let it linger, and either you're sitting on your laurels, or you're not doing what you want to what needs to be done. And then the second thing is a coaching philosophy. You nailed it with that statement of coaching philosophy, because I think that there were a lot of players on the end of the Pelicans bench at the end of this previous season that could have gotten on the floor. We've talked a lot about Jordan Hawkins, but it's not just Jordan Hawkins, more Dyson Daniels minutes, more Matt Ryan minutes, like guys who should have got into the game and helped the Pelicans in a way, even in the playoffs. And I think that Willie's continual reliance on what he knows. We've been preaching about this, feels like season after season, about this. He needs to be more malleable when it comes to rotations, when it comes to situations. I've called it coaching the game instead of coaching your game plan, right? Like you're sticking to, okay, this person's coming in at 5 minutes, this person's coming in at 7 minutes, this person is only playing a 4-minute spurt and they're sitting down. Like that is not conducive to a successful team, especially when you have a lot of guys who can contribute, especially in a long season, right? And so I think Willie this has to be the year, now that he's got his extension, so he gets his money whether they fire him the next season or not. You have to go into this season willing to change some things around, because you can't go in there. You didn't score 90 points in a closeout playoff game at home. That's an issue. Like, that's a problem, regardless of what's especially when you have shooters and guys who can contribute like that on the end of the bench and not give them a shot. And then obviously, last but not least, the revamping of the center position. I think that is the most important thing. I think, like I was talking about with Luka and the Mavs, we've seen the blueprint for a ball dominant, kind of a freak, kind of supernova talent. You have to give them, especially when they're not the greatest defenders. Between Luka and Kyrie, even if you go into the season, let's say you make a trade for Trae Young, and Trae Young and CJ are your backcourt, or even if you don't, and you have, I'm just saying, even if you don't, and you go in there with Zion and CJ, like, if you found Dallas has found a way to show has found a way to insulate that those defensive liabilities by surrounding them with rim running, physical, athletic big men at all times, right? You have 48 minutes of that. And I think that is something that the Pelicans need to go into this offseason really thinking about, having that as the fulcrum of the offseason. Because I don't, with Zion, even with Zion there, we've been talking about the rim protection for 2 or 3 seasons, and it just has not been addressed. And I think this is the offseason where you have to do this to give this team a shot in order to be successful. They have to have some semblance of rim protection and athletic big on the floor at all times. We've seen that old guard kind of go away, right? You see who's in the finals right now, right? Kristaps Porzingis, Derek Lively, and Daniel Gafford, like, who should be a Pelican if you've listened to this podcast. But yeah, I think that the center position has to be revamped.
Yeah, I would agree with everything you just said. I mean, if you listen to this podcast, I think the Pelicans should have 3 new centers to start next season. On your BI point, again, like, there's just too much. Like, earlier in the season, Willie Green was calling Zion and BI the best duo in the NBA. You don't go from that to saying trade this guy at all costs. Like, there's just something's off there. And as you've documented and highlighted on this episode before, a trade with Brandon Ingram is very complex, because the other team has to either, one, think that BI is a max player. And if there's multiple teams that think BI is the max player, shouldn't you be kind of reconsidering, should we be trading this max player? And if they're not thinking that he's a max player, are they willing to give you their best player in return without you giving up a whole lot more? And so, like, I think that there's a lot of intricacies there.
He also gets to decide where he
choose
wants
if he wants to resign, right? Like, there's so many things that go into a trade like that. I told you, I think that a lot of this is gauging what BI's value is and trying to drive the price down on an extension. That's where I'll hang my hat until something changes. But other than that, like, BI in his exit interview, again, I think this was the most open he's been in a while. He's like, what's keeping you and Zion from being the duo that people want you to be? He's like, communication. Like, they need to know of each other. And you talked about it all season long. We didn't think this season, even if Zion were able to play, and let's say they get past OKC, I'm not sure if you beat a Luka and Kyrie. I'm not sure if you beat an Ant in Minnesota. I'm not sure if you beat a Denver Nuggets and Jokic, because I still don't think the chemistry's there. It's not, yes, Brandon Ingram plays slower than how everybody else wants to play on the roster, maybe excluding JB and CJ. But there's just so many things outside of just BI and Zion where, like, basic plays aren't made in the course of an offensive game. that teams with chemistry that have played together and know how to play off their best player and know how to play off their second best player and know how to run plays for their tertiary players and know how to run plays for guys on the bench, like that just don't happen for the Pelicans. And so I think it's a chemistry thing from top to bottom, not just BI and Zion. The other thing I would say I think is center is number one that needs to be addressed. Is I think there needs to be a changing of the starting lead guard. Whether CJ is on the bench, whether there is a different starter, I just think that it would benefit both Zion. I think it would benefit BI. I think it would benefit player X, who's going to be the athletic center for the Pelicans. I think it would benefit everybody involved if you have a more facilitating off-ball point guard, non-traditional point guard who can both get other people involved, get other baskets involved, see the floor like a floor general who's not looking to get their own shot all the time. I think that player in itself, regardless if you think it's Darius Garland or Trae Young or Dyson Daniels, I think a player like that is a plus to this roster no matter what. And so I think that's the second thing you need to work. My third thing is a little bit trivial, but I honestly think that until they do this, the Pelicans are going nowhere. I think the Pelicans need to get new jerseys. Look, the skeleton uniform was fire.
I'm with it.
Everybody was with the everybody was with the uni, everybody was with the court, everybody was very excited. I feel like there needs to be hey, Zion is figuring this thing out. He's understanding how to be a professional. It's time to rebrand as a team. Last year you did the court. Last year you mixed with the city uniform. Now it's time to dive completely in. And what are your thoughts on that? Like, I'm not all biased for making that ass.
No, I'm with it. I think we all can agree that those, especially those god awful Navy jerseys. I think they have run their course. I would be a fan of banging. I mean, the Jazz the team that shall not be named in Utah just unveiled their new jerseys. Like, it's time for the Pelicans to get rid of it. I would be inclined to do some throwback version of the pinstripe jersey or the yellow jersey that J.R. Smith and Chris Anderson did the dunk contest in, or just bring back like the flag jerseys, but the all navy jerseys and the all white jerseys. I think it's time to hang those up. You could put them in the rafters. You know, you could put the number one, you could put the Zion pick, put the ping pong ball with the Zion pick in that jersey in the rafters, and let's move on to some newer pastures. I think it's time. I agree with you on that.
I couldn't agree more. So, I mean, again, I just think the evidence showed all year long that the starting lineup was not going to work. You didn't have a rim protector. CJ is a scorer. He is not a point guard. I think the bookends of this lineup is where the biggest changes need to happen. Now, speaking of CJ, I did want to give him his props. One, the Walker Kennedy Citizenship Award. You know, shout out to him for that. Regardless how you feel about CJ, since he's arrived in New Orleans, he's done his best to make his impact both on the court, in the locker room, in the community. Again, the Pelicans have prided themselves on getting folks that are bought into that aspect, more mature, a little bit further along in life, looking to do different things. So regardless of how you feel about his game, how it fits on this team moving forward, you cannot knock him for what he's been able to do off the court for this team and for the city altogether. The second part is Herb Jones finally made first team all defense. Now, this is the first year where they changed the rules, and basically you could just pick all centers if you want to. But Herb Jones was the only guard in the starting lineup that was able to make first team. Now, Trey's been clamoring for it. Pelicans media's been clamoring for it. All national pundits been clamoring for Herb Jones first team all defense. But my question to you is, what's next for Herb? Because I feel like he got better defensively, career high in free throw percentage, career high in three-point percentage. But I still think there's another level to Herb offensively that hasn't been untapped yet. So what are your thoughts on the next step for Herb Jones?
Yeah, man, her being the only non-center on that first team All NBA, that is a huge deal. Because, like you said, this is the first year where people could have went crazy. Like they could have thrown whoever they wanted up there, literally any player. Like it wasn't like he was just beating out backcourt guys. He was beating out everybody in the NBA. So he beat out at least the rest outside of 4 people. He beat out the rest of the people in the NBA. So that is a huge deal for Herb. I think. One thing that Herb, I would love to see Herb his next step, next evolution is honestly consistency, because he took off in the middle of the season from the 3-point line. I mean, he had one of the best like outlier seasons. I kept telling everybody, like, you keep seeing close to 40 on threes, but he was shooting like 18% of like top of the three. So you're like, how does he get to 40%? It's because he was shooting like close to 80% from the corner 3-point line. And that was something that nobody had ever seen. It was incredible to watch. But he tailed off towards the end of the season. His offense kind of sputtered. He kind of lost that touch from the 3-point line, lost a little confidence in it. And I think it showed on the court. Now, Herb was incredible in the playoffs. I think he was one of the best players for the Pelicans in that entire OKC playoffs in that sweep. But I still think that his game, his offense kind of tailed off. I tweeted a picture of it, and in a 10-game stretch, he was barely hitting threes and he was barely scoring. And I just think his aggression and his ability to shoot confidently, if he's doing that in a game, he unlocks the Pelicans in a different level offensively, because he's gonna do his thing defensively. I know questions about, is he the starting lineup and does he need to be the one? The best version of Herb Jones is starting and giving the opposing team's best player hell. It's just what it is. You get the best value of Herb Jones, who I think really is up there for best contract in the NBA. You get the best value of Herb Jones from being in that starting lineup. And so I think, again, the Pelicans lucked up and found a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 year, however long Herb stays in New Orleans, year starter. He's just that good defensively. But I think his offensive consistency, because I think he has shown you that when he goes and puts the work in, it translates on the court, right? It shows. You've seen him get better at ball handling. You've seen him learn from his mistakes on the defensive side of the ball during his rookie year, and things like that. But obviously, where you saw the most growth was his 3-point shot. But I think, and so you know that if he works on it, it translates to the court. But be more consistent. Keep that consistency. Keep that confidence in that 3-ball, because he has to be a guy. If he's going to shoot like he did in the middle of the season, if that can be something they rely on, Herb needs to take 6, 7 threes a game if that's something that he's going to do, if he's going to shoot that well. And he needs to be able to knock down a good percentage of those in order for this Pelicans team to look how they looked at times when Herb was rolling.
Right. The thing I look at, and again, hopefully Herb Jones is on the Pelicans for a long time, because May 28th in Louisiana is not on Herb Day. So that would be awkward if he was traded any. The thing I look at a Herb with, again, we compare him to Jaden McDaniels, and I think that Herb is a better defender, like much better defender, in my opinion, than Jaden McDaniels on a consistent basis. But when I look at their offensive games, they can be similar. I'd like to see Herb get more comfortable inside like 10 feet, where he's comfortable with the floater, when he's comfortable finishing in traffic, where he's comfortable with different things. You saw him add the Josh Hart transition layup to his game. You saw him get more confident on the 3-point line. Now it's how can you finish around the goal better? Because there's too many times where Herb just says, forget about the offense. I'm just going to lock in on defense. When I think somebody who's 6'8" and very athletic and can jump and can move and can score can be more than that on the offensive end. Like, I think there's times where he's too passive as a role player. And to your point, that's going to come with confidence, right? Confidence comes from demonstrated ability. And so now you have another season on your belt where you took another step offensively. Now what else can you add to your game? I see it in the comment. Herb is absolutely a gym rat. You know he's working on something this summer to say, I'm going to be best at that. Probably not going to leave the city of New Orleans, probably going to lock himself in the gym and work on that all summer long and come back, add to the game. I think that's another element. That's the thing that is unique about this Pelicans team and the Thunder and everybody else, and that your role players that you want to be around for a decade are still ascending. It's not like you know who they are. Like you look at Boston, it's like these guys are 29, 32, Drew Holiday 34. Like this is who this player are. You're still trying to figure out what is the peak Herb Jones. What is the peak Zion? Like Zion is still 24, which is wild to me. Like what is the peak Trey Murphy? Like you're still trying to figure that out. And I think a player like Herb is going to continue to grow at an accelerated pace. Now you brought something up a little bit earlier about Trajan Langdon and him leaving for the GM job in Detroit, which again, it was a matter of time before he took that job. Bryson Graham took over, homegrown person who started at the training staff, everything. Great story, took over him at his spot. But my question to you is like, how big of a loss is losing Trajan? Because you look at the Pelicans, and again, like it's easy to look at the results of this season, how the season ended, and say the world is ending, the Pelicans suck, the franchise is doomed. But then you look at all the players on the Pelicans roster, you're like, oh, that's a good player other people want. That's a good player other people want. You see people getting plucked from the coaching staff and interviewing for head coaching jobs every year. You see people in the front office interviewing for it. So, like, there's something that people want here from that standpoint. How big of a loss do you think Trajan, who was very close to the players, very close to player evaluation, how big of a loss do you think that is for the team?
I think it's a loss. I don't think it's a huge loss. I don't think it's a tiny, small loss. I think it's a loss because Trajan, a lot of things Trajan is respected for in the league, but one of the things is that he's a really good scout. Like he's good with finding talent. Like that is what brought him to New Orleans, right? We're building this thing. Let's find the talent, right? And you've seen the Pelicans have made some really good picks. Obviously, they whiffed on some, obviously with like Kyra and Jackson and things like that. But they made some really good ones, right? And whenever you find a guy in the second round and he becomes first team all NBA, first team all defense, and then also sets a career record, a career high in 3-point percentage, and then is in the running for best contract in the NBA. You did something right? You did something right. You found Dyson Daniels, who is, well respected as one of the premier perimeter defenders in the league, with leading the league in deflections and things like that. You found Trey Murphy, like you found guys, even some of the undrafted guys. You found Jose, you found Najee, you found guys like that. And so, he did have some really good qualities and some things that he did really, really positively in New Orleans. But I think Bryson Graham is going to be just as good, man. I think he's a guy who's going to come in. He's again well respected around the Pelicans organization because he's put in so much sweat equity with the organization and with the franchise over the long tenure that he's been in New Orleans. And I think he's a guy that you want to bring in fresh talent and fresh new minds, but you also want to have people who are familiar when you have a situation that is not volatile, but the Brandon Ingram, Zion, CJ, like there's a lot of moving parts and things like that. So you want to have a familiar face in there who can come in and say, listen, Trajan is gone, but you know me, you know my face, you know that I'm not here to do something awful to you, and we have a rapport, we have a relationship, and if business needs to be had, I think that Bryson is a guy that can step in and do some of those things. Now, he may not be the same scout, like he may well be as good as Trajan as a scout now that he has an opportunity to kind of do some other things. But I think that part, and Trajan has a lot of credibility in the league, especially with Duke and Duke guys and things like that. And so I think it is a loss. I don't think it's the biggest loss in the world. I don't think it's something to just be taken for granted as well, because Trajan, he is the guy who was in the war room making some of those decisions on the picks that you like. But I do think Bryson Graham is going to step in, and I think he's going to be really, really, really good in his job.
Here's my question. Does Trajan want to pick up the phone and talk Jalen Duren? Anyways, so our last topic.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't think he wants to pick up and talk.
I don't think he's picking up the phone for I don't think so either. So our last topic of the day, you also mentioned, but I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into it. So Obviously, James Borrego's name has been floated around with the Lakers, which it sounds like they're going to be going with JJ Redick. And then JJ Redick might be trying to take James Borrego as his lead assistant. I don't know. But he's also interviewing for the Cavs job with Kenny Atkinson and every other coach in the league looking for a job from that standpoint. And you look at that, and it's, again, obviously there's people that are interested in his services, his track record in Charlotte, and obviously what he was able to do growing the Pelicans this year. But like my question is like, how big was his impact this year? Like, and I know that sounds sacrilegious because again, the Pelicans won a whole lot more games. But like, if I look at the offensive rating, they were 20th in 2022 and 11th in 2023. But then if I like look at everything else, like 3-point attempts were 29th, and last year they were 24th. And the year before, or in 2022, 3-point percentage was 15th. And then last year was 4th. And then in terms of like their pace, it was 16th last year and 16th the year before. So like you look at the team as like, okay, there were some improvements, some areas. But also it was the season where CJ McCollum, BI, and Zion played the most amount of games. Zion played the most amount of games in his career. BI played the most amount of games in his career. So you had like the majority of your team together for the majority of the season. Now, at different times, people took their times being injured, but this was the healthiest year. So my question to you is like, how much was it James Borrego's offensive system, and how much was you actually had your two best players available?
Oh, that's a very interesting question, because I would say, and I would also, I think this answer is going to be interesting, because I don't know if it was a lot of James Borrego, but I also don't know if it was like all James Borrego's fault that it wasn't James Borrego's offense.
I couldn't agree more.
I don't know if he did have, because James Borrego coached, he was a head coach this season for one game. And I don't know if anybody remembers that game, but the Pelicans scored a shit ton of points that game.
Yes, they did.
They scored a ton of points that game. Go back and look. Google James Borrego takes Willie Green's place for a game, and go look at the box score. Go look at the final score. And so, that could be okay. That is the spot as smallest sample size as you can get. And so you can say, okay, well, when he did coach, they scored a lot of points, but like it's only one game. And so and then there were times where Zion was complaining about having to buy into the offense, and then something changed, and then Zion started having the ball more, and then it kind of went away from that, and then it went back to it. So you don't know how much of it was Willie Green just saying, all right, that worked for a little bit, we're going back to what I do. Or you don't know if it's, like I've seen in the comments, certain players saying, hey, I don't know if I want to run that offense. That's not the offense that I'm comfortable running. And so, I understand that that's what you want to do, but I'm going to do this, right? And I don't know how much of it was that. And so, yes, I think a big, huge majority part of it was the fact that Zion was available. Like, we can stop it there. Like, Zion is that good of a talent, where just the fact that he's available should make your team win more games, just because he plays more games. But yes, then you had Brandon Ingram had more, played the most games. CJ played a ton of games, and until the end where kind of wheels kind of fell off. But I think that is a major part of it. But I will not say that I didn't see changes in the way the Pelicans were playing at times that resembled what I thought James Borrego was going to come into this season and do for the Pelicans. I did see some of that. And so I don't know. And then again, you don't know how much of it was James Borrego just being hands off, or was it I'm trying is just 2 or 3 people who are above me or who are actually in the game, do not want to agree with that. So that is an interesting question. And I would love to hear, in the comments and on the comments of the video, like, how much of James Borrego's offense do you think the Pelicans implemented? Because that's an interesting question. And how much of it do you think was the health of the best players? Because I do think there was some things there. I do think there was some untapped potential, and I just don't know how much of it was on James Borrego. So, that's interesting. But if he does leave, to have somebody come in, you've hired Mike D'Antoni as an offensive analyst. You've brought in James Borrego to be an offensive mind. And at some point, either you have to bring somebody in who's going to dramatically change and kind of play into the way the team plays best, which I think we all can agree, Zion on the ball, and people kind of doing things around setting screens and getting offense going around that. So you either have to bring somebody in who's going to do that, or we got to start looking at why these offensive minds are coming in and things aren't changing. And that's a different question for a different story for a different time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more there. Couple things. So I see in the comments, like, the Pelicans had their two best players for the majority of the season. They won 49 games. Here's the thing, though. And here's why this is just so damn frustrating. Zion didn't really turn into Zion until like All-Star game on. Because
after the season tournament,
he wasn't in shape. And so even if you came into the season like, hey, we're going to play around Zion, I don't know if he was necessarily in the condition to support that. And like, you saw him getting tired during out games. You saw him turn the ball over, and he talked about himself. That was a wake-up moment for him that he ultimately grew. And so in order to win games in the first part of the year, you kind of had to say, BI, this is how we've run the team so far because Zion hasn't been available. Lead us there. Well, then when Zion turned Super Saiyan and got his powers back, then it was like, okay, well, now we need to play around Zion. But BI, we haven't really asked you to play this off-ball role where you're more one dribble shot, you're more two guard, right? Like, you're more playing off Zion. And we haven't really repped it before because neither one of y'all have been healthy at the same time. So, like, we need you to adjust on the fly and figure out how to be a second option on the fly in the second part of the season. Oh, then he got hurt, right? And so, like, part of it's like, okay, well, some of these numbers are flabby, but at times they were a top 10 offense, and at times they were a top 10 defense. But it just so happened that, like, they could never sustain it. Like, how does this team win 49 games and never go on a 5-game win streak, Garrick? Like, that's insane to me that you could never string together 5 straight wins, even though you won that many damn games. And so, like, there was just that element to it all season long where it's like, oh, it's close, but, like, we're still not figuring it out. Oh, it's close. Back to the drawing board.
And I think that's because those are great points. And I think part of the frustration of the Pelicans and their roster and the way it's built and the things that are going on. I think the Pelicans are like the litmus test for like positionless basketball. And what I mean by that is Brandon Ingram looks like a small forward. He looks like a power forward, really. He's tall and lanky, about tall. But he really is like a two guard. Like if you looked at him through that aspect, you would say like he plays more like a two guard. And so if he slid down to the two guard spot, I think that, a lot of the things that Brandon Ingram likes to do, you would say, okay, I understand why he does that. He wants to shoot. He wants to have the ball in his hand. He wants to score because he has a shooting guard's game. Zion is the same way. Like, he's built like a power forward. So everybody's like, well, why isn't he rebounding? And it's like, well, because he plays point guard. That's why, because he's a guy who's at the top of the key. So they look like a certain body frame, or they look like a position, but the best players at times are expected to do things that the position that they really play like they don't really do. And I think when you try to force them in those boxes on offense, right, and you don't allow them to play in ways that they need to play, you get some of this clunkiness and things going on. And so, for Zion and Brandon Ingram too, and that's what, again, as we wrap this up, that's what makes this season just feels like a missed opportunity, because you had Zion playing out of his mind. I think the Zion we saw against the Lakers I think Zion would have afforded Brandon Ingram so much time to figure it out in a
why
playoff.
it's so hard for me to.
And it's just so it sucks because like you never can get it. And so listen, I tell everybody NBA seasons are like parades. Like they are this big spectacle. You like sitting there watching it. You're looking at this incredible stuff, and then just like that, it's done. And so you can't. I understand from the business aspect and from the roster aspect, you can't just sit on your hands and say, well, if. But at the same time, like I'm just glad I'm not in a GM's position, in a Pelicans GM's position, because it's such a difficult thing to do, to give up on, a 26-year-old a bucket getter and a guy who has shown you every year he's gotten better. Now he got his faults, got things going on and wrong with him. And so if you move off of him, again, I've always said just go get a better player. Like, don't make a lateral move. Go get you. I'm hanging my hat on, if you're going to trade Brandon Ingram, I feel like you have to attach a pick to him because the person you're bringing back is better. Like, I think that's the only way you trade Brandon Ingram. If you feel like you're getting an equal player back, I think that's a lateral move. And so it's just such this year felt like everything was locking into place. Like the Pelicans were making a run. I remember tweeting and saying playing a Jaws noise because they were going for the 3 seed. And I mean, one pull up.
NBA got hurt.
How many times can we say you remember that injury? You remember the Boogie Cousins free throws. You're gonna remember that pull up layup against LeBron against the Lakers, giving him the big 40-point outing. Just sucks that it keeps happening at the end of the seasons and for Zion and Brandon Ingram. And if this is the end, then I think that like Zion posted this week, I think there are going to be a lot of regrets between the both of them and with the Pelicans, team and franchise.
Yeah. Like I said, if you look at, again, these are human beings, these are grown men, these are fathers, this is sons and things like that. But you look at this like assets. I'm never trading an asset when it's at its lowest point. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. For all that, you should do nothing, go to the trade deadlines, and the same offers you're going to get right now are going to be the offers that you get at the deadline. Oh, by the way, who knows if BI comes back with his head on fire, and then you don't want to trade. And so, like, I just wouldn't be trying to give players away for nothing or for pieces. Because, like, if you listen to what David Griffin had to say at the exit interviews, he's like, look at the West. Like, everyone's getting bigger, more athletic, and younger, and it's an arms race. That doesn't scream to me, well, let's get rid of the number 2 player and bring back some pieces that may not be as good, but maybe like, that's not what that screams to me. My biggest thing with all of this is, while you're not going anywhere as long as Zion is not on the court, especially Zion and BI is still on the roster on the court, I think that there at times, and Willie Green falls victim to this, is an over-reliance on those 2 players when you have built a good supporting cast around them. Like, we talked about it before, my biggest headache of the season is how Jordan Hawkins was never incorporated to the offense at all. He was just like, oh, okay, we need a shooter, throw him out there, versus like you're an offense in himself. But like, even Trey, I feel like there's so much untapped potential.
Absolutely.
Like,
that's mine.
added to
I
this
agree.
roster. That's an offense in itself. I think Dyson Daniels can run offense for you and get open shots for other players. Like, there's just over reliance on BI, go get us a bucket. Zion, go get us a bucket. Like, there's just not enough. How do we get the most out of all the players? We just talked about how deep the roster is. Why is there no let's run a set over here to throw an offense and give them a different look? There's just not enough of that.
I mean, Rev, we watch PJ Washington, not to cut you off, but we watch PJ Washington like put OKC to bed because they just kept running plays and getting him open and for corner threes. And it's like, Man, I think that Trey Murphy's a better three-point shooter than PJ. How is even the Trey Murphy run from baseline to baseline play that everybody knows is coming. Everybody see they didn't even run that for him, and it just I agree with you 1,000%. It just felt like the entire year there were so many gadgets that you could pull from. You could pull from Matt Ryan and Zion pick and rolls, and Jordan Hawkins and Trey Murphy pick and rolls, and you could be doing a whole bunch of different things. And it just felt like it always boiled down to Zion get a bucket, and then everybody kind of just react off that, and BI go get a bucket, and everybody react off that. And then I think everybody's least favorite option, CJ go get a bucket. And everybody react off that. And so I agree with you 1,000%. Just wanted to put that in there.
I think the biggest change that the Pelicans need to make, other than chemistry, like Zion knowing his team and knowing how to elevate each person based off their skill set, BI included if he's on the roster, is I think Willie Green needs to change his mentality from defenders who can shoot, or we can teach them to shoot with Fred Vinson, to shooters who can defend. I get it. Defense is what this team was built off, and that's why this team was successful all year long. They're very athletic. They can do a whole lot by stopping people. But at the end of the day, look at who's in the finals. The teams that can fill up the bucket at any particular time, because they have so many ways to beat you on offensive. You've got to be able to be adaptable and say you drafted a player like Jordan Hawkins. You got to figure out a way to play. You drafted a player like Trey. You got to figure a way to get the most out of him. Whoever you draft moving forward, we've got to put more shooting on the court so that you can give an option here or there outside of go save us one of our best players. It's just there's got to be more from that standpoint. So again, the all season is close. Again, I know it's over for the Pelicans, but we're still in this season of the NBA, even though people have not come to grips with that. We will be back to the drafts in a couple weeks. We got the finals in between. What you got left for the people as we start breaking down these draft picks and potential moves for the Pels?
As always, you never know what people are going through, so give someone a smile today. Yeah, the off season is coming, and we'll be here to cover the things that's going on. I think everybody is going to be searching for certain player types. I think everybody has an agenda going into this offseason. Some people want to see the big Brandon Ingram trade. Some people want to see the CJ McCollum trade. Some people want to see the rim protecting bigs. I think everybody kind of has an idea of what the Pelicans need to do and what they need to bring into this team this offseason, and we'll be here to cover it all. So as always, follow myself at Garrick_Rattler on Twitter. Follow my brother at Raphael_Rattler on Twitter. Follow the page at NO Basketball No E. That's on Twitter, Instagram, wherever you get your social media. Follow us at New Orleans.basketball. We'll see you guys next time.